This podcast is brought to you by Anchor Podcasts. Have you yourself ever wanted to be a podcaster? Well, Anchor makes it simple and easy for you to start today. Download their app on your iPhone or Android device and go through their step-by-step process from recording all the way through distribution. Visit their website, anchor.fm, or download the app on your Android or iPhone device today. That's Anchor Podcast. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? This is Travis Fowler, Harkwriter with 4CP, and I am here doing my very first interview. And with me today is the current reigning WFC Hometown Heroes champion, a man that I've actually gotten to know over the last couple of years now. He actually runs the WA Dojo out here in Tulsa.
Hunger Dojo, yeah.
There it is, Hunger Dojo. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the very first guest to the 4CP interview, Mr. Justin Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for doing this.
It's an honor to be the first.
Always an honor to be the first when you're talking with me, right?
Yes.
That's how we roll.
Yes, announcer Jesus.
It's the savior of commentary.
The savior, well, okay.
But hey, we're not going to keep this about me because obviously I wanted to...
Well, we can talk about you a little because here's the thing. Like when I met you, the first time I met you was, okay, so my backstory is I started in 2001, wrestled pretty consistently until about 2014, and then I retired. I'd started a company. I outside, I was making money. I was like, well, why work for $5 paydays when you're working for $500 and working for yourself, so... But as everybody does, you get the bug. You start thinking maybe one more. So my one more comes at the end of 2019, 2020, I guess, because it's COVID time.
Right,
yeah,
right.
We're starting to get out of COVID. They're starting to put on indie shows again. During COVID, I got a lot of downtime. I think I started watching some old videos, thinking I could do one more. So Tim Rockwell works something out so I'm doing one more, and then you end up being the commentator during that match.
Right.
Now, when I left wrestling in 2014, we did not have fancy TV or anything like that. We didn't really have any commentators. So that
was too high tech back then.
It was. Well, constantly, we were just wrestling for the live crowd. That was it. What? There was no, this is going to be on the internet show later or anything like that. So Travis is, I look at him, I was like, okay, what's this guy's background? He's got an interesting look. Burnham's the other commentator. I know Burnham, so I'm like, all right, well, at least Burnham won't suck. But then I go back and watch it with his commentary. His commentary was good. Like, it added a layer. I remember seeking you out after that going, I didn't expect much of you because I didn't know who you were. I thought, who's this Mark? And it turns out his commentary really added that layer that made me enjoy the match more when I watched you back. So that is my first experience with Travis. And then I stuck around for 3 years now. And you started calling some more of my matches.
Well, that took a turn that actually I did not even anticipate. I appreciate all the kind words. I was more so going to operate the vehicle for you to lead into, when did you start training? He kind of took over there for
why are you taking over my own
good?
Everybody, it's like watching a comic movie. Every secret origin, it's the same thing. Right?
Sure.
Oh, I like wrestling. I signed up for a class. Oh, I did this, I did that. Right. Who wants to see that?
I mean, people are just sometimes interested. Did you do the backyard style thing?
I did. Okay, it's funny. You should ask that. So, in the 90s, backyard wrestling was becoming a thing, right? You could they'd have infomercials.
Yes.
The best of backyard wrestling. And I'm on one of those, by the way.
Are you really?
Yeah.
But we're going to need to talk afterwards. I need to see this video.
So there's this thing back in the 90s, you could start websites through these companies called GeoCities, things like that. Mm-hmm. These are pretty, so I took an HTML class in junior high, so I kind of knew how to put a website together, which, believe it or not, was a thing that was hard to do in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Not anybody could just do it. Putting a website together gave you special talents and skills.
GoDaddy.com didn't exist back then.
Believe it or not, I probably wouldn't have been a wrestler like I am had I not learned that skill.
Yeah.
I learned how to do this. I put a little website together. So me and my buddies, we like Raw. It's 1997, 98. Everybody's into WCW, Monday Night Wars. we're big fans, but I'm kind of one of those OCD people, right? I can't just enjoy something.
No, you have to nitpick it.
I have to be part of it.
Well, you know what I mean by that. It's like you got to have your fingerprints on it because you want to make sure it comes off very well. By the way, guys, if y'all hear some extra audio, don't mean to cut you.
We're at backstage at
yeah,
show.
yeah. So never mind the audio. Hopefully these mics pick up most of it and drown that out. Anyways, continue.
Yeah, so I'm a little OCD. So like, I can't just enjoy something as a fan. Now I got to understand how it works. I got to break it down. I got to be part of it. I got to make it better somehow. And so we start doing backyard wrestling. But I don't just, like you see most backyard wrestling videos, it's kids on trampolines. No.
Right.
I build a ring in my backyard.
Like from scratch.
Like from wood, yes. Wood, metal, would spend $1,000 on it, right? There's my senior trip money I basically spent on this thing. Skip my senior trip. I put together a nice professional ring. We got these. It looks cool.
Yeah.
And I'm running this like a real wrestling show. I got a run sheet. I got times. I got a camera. And so like people would come to my backyard. They go, "This is not what I was expecting. This is different." We started building up a fan following. People started buying our videos online because I got this website. I'm selling videos. I'm actually making money.
Yeah, you're making it hand over fist. It sounds like just doing everything yourself still.
Maxim Magazine calls me. They want to do a story on backyard wrestling. They come to my backyard, do this whole story on backyard wrestling.
Really?
104.5 The Edge, local radio station. They start, hey, can we come out and do some stuff from you guys? And so we Channel 8, they're like, oh, can we want to do a story on backyard wrestling. So they do this story on backyard, and of course it's real salacious. Right. And like, oh my God, these kids are so stupid. But we're like, hey, any publicity was good publicity.
Oh yeah.
So we do all this, and that's how we actually get into wrestling because the local wrestling promotion at the time was kind of going through a dry where there was, the fans had kind of died off a little after their big angles they blew off. And so they're looking for something. They hear that I'm drawing 50 people to come to my shows. They think, well, hey, if we get him and some of his friends to come wrestle on our show,
that's a good deal.
50 tickets sold, hey, why not? So that's how I ended up getting into wrestling. And then the guy who was running the company at the time, Rocco Valentino, he had a side business. He sees that I have a website where I do this stuff that I'm selling, all this stuff. And he says, hey, I run a company and I need a website. Can you build this for me?
Right.
I was like, I've never built one for a professional company, but okay, I can try. And I do. And
did they pay you for it?
Well, he wiped away my wrestling school debts.
It
was $2,000 to go to. Yeah.
I get you.
And not only that, now I'm running this guy's website. Who do you think's he's gonna push? I'm helping this guy out. Right. So without having learned how to do that, maybe I never get to the level I'm at. Because I enjoyed a tremendous amount of success when I first started. I didn't lose a match for forever.
I remember you telling me about this on one of the first conversations we had.
I won a title in my first match.
Yeah.
Nobody does that.
They gave you the Santino push before Santino existed.
And this is like, you got to remember, like, people forget there was a time before the internet.
Right.
And what I mean before the internet is
the magic wasn't ruined.
Nobody had a phone that you could access the internet until probably 2004.
Yeah.
03, 04 maybe, I don't know. But like nobody was walking around with the internet in their pockets.
Right.
So this is back in the old school wrestling was still a thing. Mm-hmm. There was still a lot of kayfabe. And so I remember like my first month in the business, I'm winning a title. Channel 8, or not Channel 8, Tulsa World comes out, does a story on me for their Broken Arrow people section.
And because you're the Broken Arrow bad boy.
I'm the Broken Arrow bad boy,
right?
Yeah. And then on top of that, the third show I'm on, Kurt Hennig's backstage.
Oh.
Right? Okay. So I'm just sitting here hanging out with Kurt Hennig backstage. And I'm thinking to myself, this is my trajectory. I haven't even done anything yet, and look how famous and big I am. I'm getting. I just assumed I was a superstar at that point.
Right.
Then it was all downhill from there.
I think that was going to lead into my next question because, guys, part of what we're doing on these interviews is I'm learning stories, kind of like you're learning stories. I like to have just a conversation because me and you have had several conversations, but it's been mainly centered around like what we've liked about wrestling, like the mainstream wrestling, WCW.
Yeah, our takes on what things that happen.
Right. Yeah. But me, I'm learning some of these stories just for the first time, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I got a lot of stories. So, 23 years, I got some stories.
You've got a lot of stories, I'm sure. Here's the next question, though. With like you were alluding to just then, it all started to kind of go downhill. What happened that made it really start feeling like this is where I was going, and now I'm kind of going back down?
Well, okay, so indie wrestling, especially at that time, it's a lot of work to promote a show because you don't really have the internet to promote for you, right? So it's all word of mouth. It's all, hope you hang a poster and somebody finds out about it. But the only way you could really build a crowd was by consistently being in the same places at the same times So it had to be every Saturday night at the same place, and that's the only way you could really build a crowd.
Right.
And each show had to be good enough to keep everybody who came coming and them invite a friend. And so we were going through kind of a down spell. This thing about WCW WF merge around
2001, March 2001. Yeah.
Yeah. So, which really people don't understand. It sounds, that was cool. But WCW went out of business because business was going down.
Yes.
And so even though WWF was still doing fine, there's less product, less interest. If there had been more interest, WCW would have still been in business.
And I think I would agree, and that's something I think you and I touched on just a little bit, is that the reason WCW died off amongst the number of reasons, the AOL Time Warner merger.
It was a big reason, yeah.
Everything else that we've heard.
But ECW dies,
Yes, ECW goes bankrupt. WCW gets bought out. Yeah. So to set the scene, 2001, we're back to really only one game in town.
Yeah, it's a dark time in wrestling. I mean,
absolutely.
And that carries, it's one of those weird things. Whether you like WWF or WCW or the product AEW that they're offering at that time, it's good when there's a lot of people who do like it.
Yes.
Because the better they do, the better you do at a smaller level. That trickles downhill. So when one of them starts doing bad, companies start going out of business, that trickles downhill too. Other companies, there's less interest, less publicity, it's not the cool thing to do anymore.
Right.
So I went through a few years of just really dark times in wrestling where we were struggling to put butts in the seats.
Right.
And because, like I said, internet wasn't a thing. People weren't, like I said, it would be 3 or 4 years before everybody had an internet accessible phone.
Right.
So it just wasn't a thing. People didn't sit around at keyboards and do wrestling. And again, I was setting up rings by myself some nights. We were wrestling in front of 8 people some nights. In those dark times, it molded me. It made me better at what I did because I realized if there was only going to be 8 people in that crowd, I was going to give those 8 people the best wrestling match they ever saw because the only hope I had was that those 8 people came back with 8 friends.
Right.
And that was the only way I could grow. So I had to make sure I was good at what I did. And so I would literally set up rings sometimes just to train and then tear them down the same night.
Wow.
That's
a process.
It was. And so, people talk about, oh, Justin, you set up and tear down rings now. I was like, trust me, I set up and tear down rings when I was the only one, or 2 guys, I'd grab somebody out of the crowd and say, I'll teach you how to wrestle, if we can get this ring up. And so some kid, I would teach him how to wrestle that, I was like, hey, you want to come learn how to wrestle and run around in my ring? Fine. Help me set this thing up tonight. And we did a lot of that.
Yeah.
And so, we were wrestling everywhere, church shows, blah, blah. Then it kind of started to pick back up again, 04, 05. Wrestling starts to get a little bit hot again. The internet kind of makes it cool again. Attitude era, or it was over, but you had now the ruthless aggression eras.
That's what they've pretty much coined it now.
Yeah. You kind of start getting into that era of wrestling. And for me, that was good because now we'd start seeing more fans at the shows. But at that point, the company I've been working for, the promoter kind of is like, hey, we carried it this far, but I'm kind of ready to do something else with my life. Luckily, there were some other feds popping up around that time. Then I get an opportunity in the NWA.
Oh, wow.
This is before they not the rap group.
Well, I don't think you'd fit in for other reasons.
I've got attitude.
I mean, you're not from California.
Yes,
that's what I meant.
Yes. No. So yeah, NWA. There was an Oklahoma thing, and they brought me in, and I got to, I was working with guys like Christopher Daniels. And
what year was this around?
4 or 5.
So this was like, obviously this was NWA well out of its prominence, but
yeah. It wasn't
not like what we've seen in the last few years.
It wasn't
Tim Storm, the reemergence.
Well, it's funny you said Tim Storm was there, Slam Shit. Wow. Of course, Tim Storm was 50. So this this is back when he was kind of more towards his prime.
Right.
But yeah, there was every locker room I was in, there was names.
Yes.
And it felt cool. I got to work some names. And it's just with anything, then it starts to kind of die off again. So, there was this constant back and forth in wrestling. You'd go through a hot time, downtime, that we call it the cyclical business. And so, like I said, around 08, I would say I was at my peak.
Yeah.
Where I had really honed my craft and my character. So going back to those shows, where I was struggling, I was learning so much.
Yeah.
That by this point in time, I knew how to work a crowd. I'd seen so many good guys doing it. I'd gotten to the point where, honestly, I never got nervous anymore. There was no nervousness to anything I did anymore.
Which, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong here, when you reach that level, you're kind of also getting to the burnout point because it's not as fun anymore.
Yeah. The challenge, to recycle, repackage the same thing over and over again. But I was over with the crowd, and shortly thereafter, I get my tryout with the WWF, and it just became very clear.
Yeah,
they weren't interested in me. And so you start asking, well, what am I doing? There wasn't really any other game in town. There's NWA TNA. But you're like, okay, if WWE's not interested in me, then why am I still doing this every Saturday night? Why am I not investing in something else to do on a Saturday night? So that kind of quickly led to the end. I took my one shot at promoting. I did a promoted a card in Bartlesville where I was working at the time. We promoted Bartlesville Brawl. I brought in a lot of guys I'd known throughout my career, called in some favors. For many of them, it was their last ever show too.
Right.
And so we promote this card. It does okay. And then after that, I was just kind of like, okay, I've kind of done everything. I'm done. So me and Max McGurk, we were best friends. If you guys know, Max McGurk's mom was Mike McGurk, the WWF ring announcer, and then his granddad was Leroy McGurk, who actually basically started Oklahoma wrestling in this territory back in the 30s, 40s, 50s.
Wow.
He was the promoter until Cowboy Bill Watts basically cheated him out of his company. Very mafioso style. I talked to Max's mom about it, and so Leroy had gone blind.
Oh, okay.
2 separate accidents blinded both of his eyes, which is wild. Because you think about the odds of getting one eye blinded in an accident, rare. To get 2 eyes blinded on 2 separate occasions.
Wow.
So and the crazy thing is he was still doing commentary for the TV show.
And
he was blind.
That's insane. Doing commentary is not easy, especially if you're doing now. What do you
call it? Right? What do you call it?
Yeah.
You didn't see what they did. So it was interesting to hear all that. But so he agreed. He was getting old. He wanted to sell the territory to Leroy, Leroy wanted to sell to Cowboy Bill Watts. Well, Bill Watts kind of came in and he was getting ready to buy it, so everything was kind of being handed over to him. And at some point, he just said, "Well, I'm basically running this thing, and I haven't paid you yet. I'm not going to pay you."
Oh wow!
And what are you going to do? The TV stations already know that I'm in charge, so I'm the one in charge of TV. All the contracts, all the buildings, they know I'm in charge. So I've been running this thing for you for a year. I'm just going to take over it, and
basically
you're
strong arm your way.
Yeah, you're out. And Leroy couldn't do anything, so you can't. It's one of those terrible stories about Cowboy Bill Watts. But it's crazy how much that kind of stuff happened back in the day. Yeah. Oklahoma wrestling's got a fascinating history. If you ever really deep dive into some of that stuff that went down like that.
Well, if we do a part 2 of this, we might need to do that because it seems like you've got all the knowledge.
Oh yeah. I made myself a student of the game. So I told you, when I do something, I get obsessed with it. I got to understand the intricacies. I got to write it out. So my very analytical brain, in some ways, is beneficial to me. The problem is with an analytical brain in wrestling, is it's still a performance art. So you need more of an artistic side of your brain. It's like trying to take a Van Gogh painting or whatever, a Da Vinci, and somehow mathematically break down how it's good.
Yeah.
Sometimes that works, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just have to have an artistic brain to understand that. So wrestling, you really need both sides of that brain, right? You get these free-spirited guys who are such wonderful characters, but sometimes they don't understand the business side of business.
And I think I can relate to that on the commentary aspect, strictly just because kind of like you to a certain degree, where you said you become obsessed with something. I can recall for myself, especially in my early teen years before I started hitting about 15, 16, getting into the freshman, sophomore year of high school. Before that, I was obsessed with wrestling. I didn't miss a show. I can remember around the 13, 14 age, I got invited to go out somewhere, maybe just to see a movie. And it was on a Friday night, and I refused to go because SmackDown was on. So I get that, because I also feel like that, along with playing the video games with the group of friends that I did, we would turn down the volume on the TV, or even back then when there was
your own stuff.
There was no commentary on those N64 games and whatnot, or the commentary on Just Bring It was absolutely atrocious because they're just recycling the same thing.
Yeah, for just 5 lines that they pop out.
Yeah, so it was fun to kind of do your own commentary, and to the same degree, like you said, on the art form of it, you got to be creative plus add a bit of a character, which is where it comes in together. You got to be quick with your words, quick on your toes, and you still have to tell that story, at least from the commentary aspect, with your words, and put the words to what you see in the ring. And it's one of those things that I think that helped make me better. But just watching TV, listening to how commentary goes, at least on the WWE side of things, and then later on TNA became a thing, and then rewatching old footage.
And that's the thing, like I said, I always wanted to, if I like something, I'm interested in something, I have to understand how it works.
Right.
I'd have probably been good at engineering if I'd been better at math. It's like taking something apart to see how it works kind of thing. So, you talk about something like commentary. Well, if you told me I was going to be a commentator next week, the first thing I would start doing is I'd start watching, good commentators and be like, okay, how long does he wait? How many beats does he wait? Okay, what does he talk about this? What does he talk about? And I would start trying to figure out a formula for how to be a good commentator,
right?
As opposed to I'm just going to go out there and feel it or whatever it is. And so, like I said, in some ways that can be good in wrestling, but in some ways that can be bad.
Right.
Because, again, the more you're thinking about it, the less you're in the moment, the less you're expressing yourself. You talk about, I always tell my students when I'm teaching them how to cut a promo, okay, the most important thing is you got to talk about who, what, where, why, when.
Yes. And you got to get it all in within a very short time frame.
And you may only have 15 seconds to talk about who, what, why, where, when.
Yep.
So who, hey, Travis, I want to wrestle you this Saturday because you beat me up backstage earlier tonight, right? Who, what, where, why, when.
Yes.
I want a match. That's my what, when, tonight, or Saturday night, or whenever it is. Why? Because you did this, right? And who, you, and what am I asking for the match, right? So you're saying these things, and you've got to somehow still make them artistic, right?
Yes.
Like it's still got to be, because you see these, like you talk about the Ultimate Warrior promos, super expressive, artistic dude.
But made no sense. Not at all.
And you got to have a combination of both. You look at a guy like Bret Hart, though, who was an absolute master at what he did. You could tell there was a formula to what he's doing,
right?
But still knew how to be expressive. Still knew how to be a character and emotions and things like that. Again, so you got to understand both. It's almost like one of those things. If you want to be great at anything, so there's this book called Outliers. And the concept of...
I've heard you talk about this.
Yeah, the concept of an outlier, we're talking about who's an outlier. Who is somebody who is just the absolute best at what they did? You talk about guys like Mozart, Michael Jordan, whoever you want to talk about, the great actors, the great singers. How did they become just this outlier talent that like they were head and shoulders above everybody else? Well, they talk about to be a master of something or a maestro or whatever you want to call it, of something, you have to spend 10,000 hours doing it.
Insane.
And 10,000 hours before you fully can be considered a master of something that you're doing. And so you're talking about like Mozart. Well, he wrote his symphony at 13. Yeah, but go look at a symphony he wrote at 13 versus a symphony he wrote as an adult. It's not the same.
Right.
Like one of these is a very good symphony. One of these is a masterpiece.
Yes. And
so 10,000 hours, you talk about wrestling. Okay, well, let's say you wrestle 1 hour on the maybe weekend in your match. Maybe you get an hour or two of training before that or whatever on a show. You get 2 or 3 nights of practice a week that are each 2 to 3 hours. You're talking maybe you're lucky if you get 10 hours in a week.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's 1,000 weeks? Okay, well, there's 50 weeks in a year. 2 years will get you to 120 years will get you to 10,000 hours.
Yeah, so obviously comparing that to wrestling, you hear of most of the guys, they usually don't start picking it as a total of getting the concept and everything till around year 10, year 15, which is close to that 20 that you're talking about, hit that 10,000.
Yeah, and I'm not saying there's some guys who
just
be great before that.
Yes.
But I'm talking about like to fully understand why you're great, to understand the intricacies of everything you're doing,
the nuances.
Yeah, you talk about Undertaker or somebody like that. 10,000 hours of wrestling time, 20 years when you hit your peak.
Yes.
And so for me, I took 7 years off, so I'm not even at 10,000 hours.
Nah.
You know what I mean? And
but I would even say watching your matches, there's
an element, and I prep for every class I teach, so I put an hour of prep time in at least before every class. So you could argue that's 10,000 hours, but regardless, I don't consider myself a master of what I do.
Right.
I have a very good grasp of what I do and why I do it. I probably know more holds than the average wrestler because I teach the holds.
Yes.
And I teach them every week over and over again, whereas when I wasn't a teacher, I would do a hold, and it might be a year before I did that same hold again if it never came up in a match, right?
Right.
So to be great at what you do, you'd have to be doing it 3 or 4 nights a week and doing it on the weekends to put in 10,000 hours. Now, I'm not, like I said, in no way am I trying to imply that I'm a master of wrestling. I'm just trying to express what it would take to be a master of wrestling, to fully understand how a match works. Because I botch matches all the time. Like, I have matches I go, I thought that was going to be good, and it wasn't. The analytical side of my brain immediately goes to work.
Yeah.
What did you screw up? How could you have made this better? Too much time here. This guy didn't react. You should have explained better how to tell him to sell this, react to this. This just didn't get over. You should have left it, abandoned this, moved on to something else, right? And sometimes you just got to go out there and go, you know what? I'm going to try something completely different tonight, and it may bomb, But if it works, now I've got a new set of data to work with for my analyzing the match. How is it going to work?
That's a great way to think of it, and just honestly, it's a great piece of advice for life in general. Hey, you know, I think we're winding down some time here, so I'll ask you a couple more questions.
Sure.
I know you got to.
I know. I talked for a long time. We got one question.
Hey, but you know what? It trails off. This is why I like this style of interview. We just go with it and just see where
I'm a talker.
I am too, though. It works out perfect.
Yeah.
So, final two questions.
Sure.
Now that you've been back in wrestling for about 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
Do you enjoy this run more than your last? Is it about the same? How do you feel about your work, what you've done, the relationships?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, so I saw a comedian talk once, and she made up an interesting point. She goes, "You know why your 20s are so fun? It's because you're so stupid.
Right.
You don't understand all the things you should be worried about and concerned with. You just think, oh, everything works out, whatever, you know."
Right.
And so as you get older, things become less fun because there's more things in your life to worry about. It's harder to relax and have fun, right? So there's an element that maybe my first 20 years was more fun. I was a single boy and, you know, going out and partying and trying to meet girls and all this stuff, you know, in that first run. And then now I'm older, I'm married, you know, I've got a mortgage, I've got, you know, a job, a company that I run outside of wrestling.
Responsibilities.
Yeah, so
they suck.
Fun sometimes isn't the same thing as it was back then.
Right.
But I do appreciate a good match more, right? And I enjoy the challenge of, okay, me and this guy got two different styles. He's not very, you know, he's green. Can I pull a good match out of him? How do I guide him through this match? How do I navigate the politics backstage where some guys maybe, you know, some treat me with a lot of respect. Some guys are suspect of me. How do I earn that guy's respect and, you know, love and attention and focus? And then, you know, how do I continue to be a role model because I tell these kids things to do in class? Well, I can't go out there and then do the opposite, right?
Makes you a hypocrite.
Yeah, it made me a hypocrite. So I can't go out there and say, you guys don't do these big splashes on the outside, and then I go do a big splash on the outside, right?
Well, you hurt your hip when you.
Well, yeah, I get hurt, right? But you know, how do you earn that spot? How do you earn that dive? You know, not just do it for the sake of doing it,
right?
And then I teach these guys less is more, so I got to go out there and show them less is more. So in that respect, I enjoy this run more, also because I don't know how many matches you get left. You know, when you get to 40, you don't have that many more matches left. Right. You know, so you have to appreciate and make the most out of every single one. So I would say the first run was more fun. This one's more meaningful.
I like that. I like that a lot. Well, I'm going to end these interviews with the same question that I'm going to ask everybody. We all have been fans of wrestling, probably most of us since childhood. What is your favorite wrestling memory?
Oh, man. So I can tell you this.
By the way, that can be either watching or performing.
Yeah. Oh, okay, well, I'm going to go as a fan's perspective. Okay. As a fan. So as a kid, you know, I grew up in the 80s. Hulk Hogan, you know, you just had this aura about him. So, and it's not like he didn't wrestle that often on TV, and you know, it was a treat to see Hulk Hogan.
Right.
You know, so when he became like this thing to me, when he turned and joined the NWO, that was the most emotional I ever got, like as a fan. And I knew it wasn't real.
Right.
But I got emotional about it. I was like, no. Okay. I'll put it this way, Charles. In 1992, you were too young. You weren't alive. The Gulf War happens, right? First time America's been at war since Vietnam,
right?
You know? And I know Americans, and so I'm a little kid, and I'm nervous. Like, we're at war?
Yeah.
So I don't understand war, but I understand war means people have to fight. Maybe they're going to fight here and outside my house.
Right.
But then I had an ease because I said, we got guys like Stallone and Hogan and Schwarzenegger. They'll go beat those guys up, right? Because I've been taught that from movies and stuff.
That the 80s taught you well.
And so knowing Hogan was alive and he was fighting Sergeant Slaughter on TV and stuff gave me peace, you know, that I wouldn't have had as a kid. So to see him turn like that was like your hero, the thing that made sense to you. But then like very, very shortly thereafter, I said, no, I love Hogan more than I love good and evil.
I get
right?
you.
And so I joined as an NWO fan, but not at first. It took me a few weeks to get behind it. Right? I was still there for a few weeks. I was hoping Hogan's just laying a trap for him. He's laying a trap for him, and then he's going to turn on him.
You kept that hope alive.
Yeah, I did. And finally, when I knew it wasn't going to happen, I was like, I'm going to just embrace it, man. And so I joined the NWO. I bought the Hogan NWO gear, and I was a bad guy, and bad guys were cool suddenly.
I love that.
So that maybe as a fan. As a wrestler, my favorite moment, the first time they put the big belt on me, nobody told me they were putting the big belt on me.
Mm-hmm.
They told me it was a non-title match.
I remember you told me this story.
Yeah. And so when I went over, and then suddenly they announced me as the new champion, that was a cool moment.
That's
because
awesome.
that was like, not only did you get the respect of, you know what I'm saying, hey, you're ready for the belt, kid, but also that they cared enough to make it mean more to me. Yeah, they made a rib out of it, which made it mean more because these guys, you know, they had to plan this out, think about it, talk about it. And it meant a lot to me. So, you know, maybe that one means something. You know, I met my wife through wrestling, so I got to include that as a memory.
Absolutely. Should kill you if you don't.
Yeah, all my wives I met through wrestling. Just the one.
They all happen to live down in Texas.
Yes, yeah, all my exes live in Texas. That's why I'm not allowed to wrestle in Texas.
Well, there you go. That's why. Well, Justin, I appreciate you being the first person to take some time from your busy indie schedule today to do this first interview with me. I think we're going to have to do a part 2 eventually because I think you have to talk.
We didn't even get into the stories, man. There were so many stories.
Maybe that's what we do. For
all the broken noses, broken ankles, ring rats I broke.
There you go. I heard the ring rats one. We're going to really dive into Justin's personal
Wait till they
life.
ask me my thoughts on women's wrestling.
Oh,
that'll get some ratings.
Joke 1.
Joke number 1.
I'm kidding. All right,
just kidding.
Inside
Don't
joke.
cancel me.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and all of our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm Travis Fowler Harkrider, and I will see you all again next time. And remember, keep loving pro wrestling.